Today, we are going to be talking about consumers, content, and consumption. My name is Rahul Puri. I am the head of academics here at Whistling Woods. I'm also, in my spare time, the managing director of Mukta Arts Limited. And with me on the panel today, I have Whistling Woods Vice President and Chief Technology Officer Chaitanya Chinchlikar, who we call CC, and we will refer to him as CC on this panel.
Hello.
We also have Namrata Singh, who is a digital marketing guru as well as a esports and AI enthusiast. And she also runs a startup lab and has managed to successfully fund 5 of her startup businesses in the last year.
Hello.
And on the phone, we have Mr. Samar Khan, who is a film director, a journalist, a web series producer, basically an international man of mystery who unfortunately isn't able to make it here today, but he's been kind enough to join us on the phone. Hello, Samar. And last but certainly not least, we have Anandita Chandra, who is the Whistling Woods Whistles and Echoes editor. She's also a third-year student studying media and communication in the BBA degree. So welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for giving us your time today. We are going to be talking fairly broadly and then hopefully try and narrow down on a few specifics on consumers, content, and consumption. And, you know, if I can start with Samar, because you're our content guy, Samar. You know, the conversations today are all about content, and you know, we have all of these different platforms. We've got television, we've got cable and satellite, we've got theaters, we've got podcasts. It's World Podcast Day today, so it's you know, a viable sort of platform that is now beginning to get more and more importance. And of course, we've got all these burgeoning OTT platforms that are being fed by the internet and you know, all of the providers that we have. There's going to be this tsunami of content, and there's just more content and more content and more content. I mean, you have an in-depth understanding of sort of these platforms and you know, what they need to try and exist and what they're trying to do in terms of a business model. Given the fact that the industry has always perhaps been oversaturated with content, I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. What do you think sort of the game is right now in terms of these platforms and their business model?
We have to start looking at the separate content consumption platforms and the content creation platforms as they are. So film is captive community viewing, TV is non-captive family viewing, digital is non-captive individual viewing, and VR is captive individual viewing. And you know, for a while, as every new platform comes in, the content creators try to figure out what is the unique content characteristics of that particular platform, and hence content is produced accordingly. So with OTT, and since kind of we've looked at the avalanche or tsunami of content primarily on OTT at this point of time, because it's captive individual viewing, there is a viewer for every single piece of content, right? I mean, some of the videos on YouTube with the most number of views are in Japan, for example, is just videos of people eating soup. Now, how many videos of people eating soup is too many? It depends. If you're someone who likes that, then no number of videos is enough for you, right? You want to watch a different face every time or whatever. So, because it's captive individual viewing, there is also a great deal of lowering of inhibitions when you're watching the content, because you're not necessarily consuming it with other people. So there is no social stigma. There is almost no pressure on you to watch a particular kind of content just because it's the thing to watch, right? You can watch what you want, and that allows more and more and more and more types of content to get created. So, I mean, if you think that this is it, this is not it, definitely. I think in India, we've got 30 OTT platforms right now. About half of them are freemium, some of them are pay only, some of them are completely free. So I think this will kind of start to solidify. People will start to find their business models either at the more subscription and hardly any advertising box, or more advertising and hardly any subscription box. The association that's recently happened between Alt and Z is a great example of that, right? Because one has a lot of the edgy content, but one has this massive viewer base, and they want to serve their viewer base this edgy content as well as de-risk their content production cost, and the other one suddenly gets a large number of viewers for their kind of content and with the alt logo on it. So these kind of things will create more and more and more business opportunities.
Sure.
So it's like the competition, almost in a way, competition working together for a win-win for everybody. There's win-win for Z, there's win-win for all, there's win-win for the viewers. So I don't see this thing reducing. I think we're still on the up curve right now. Now, when it comes to business models, see, the up curve is not really the time for people to figure out or people to lock in that this is my business model. The up curve is the time for people to start exploring, okay, what all can I do with this? There is your 90% of your cost is content and marketing. 10-15% is the infrastructure and delivery cost. It's amortized. So if you're able to either find partners for your content and marketing cost, or you're able to do it in such a way that it doesn't cost as much per minute, then suddenly you're in the game. Right?
Sure.
So it's really about, I think this is the time of discovery. I think this is the time of innovation in content models and business models that we will see. So I think we're at an extremely interesting stage right now. Also, we haven't really, AI and big data has barely gotten into the content consumption ecosystem, if you want to use that word. Search and discovery, like you said, along with the content, yes, there's great content and there's content for everybody, but then the flip side of that is you need to have an equally robust search and discovery model. So there's a lot of effort, money, energy that's going into search and discovery and setting that out. So I think there's lots of balls in the air, and it'll take, I think, another 5 years or so for those everything to kind of lay down and that jigsaw puzzle to get into a state where we can see what it looks like.
Okay, and Namrata, CC makes a whole list of very good and very valid points, and but somebody who's on the marketing side, and you run your own sort of marketing agency, digital agency, and you're talking to brands and clients who you believe are increasingly thinking about putting more and more money or more and more spending on online platforms and the web and things like that. Do they have a sense who's watching? Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Who do they think is watching?
So what I think all these platforms have done, the social platforms especially, which is Instagram, Snapchat, the newer ones, they've actually told you a lot about the audience demographic. They've told you who's watching when and how much. So the brands now have become extremely particular. So they're actually creating content very specifically for the platform. They're creating content very specifically for a snacky kind of an indulgence, and they're not very in love with this is my brand philosophy. They're more in love with this is what the audience wants. There's a festive season coming. In the festive season, I'm going to do 5 things so that my sales happen in a particular way. There's a lot of resonance in that side of it, and they're understanding that analytics and storytelling goes hand in hand. And just to add to what CC said and what Samar also said, I don't think this content creation is stopping, and I'm not really just worried about the human creator. I'm also looking at the machine creator. So even on the AI side of it and the ML side of it, the machine learning side of it, for the machine to learn what are the 7 genres of content, there isn't enough content for the machine to actually predict what's going to happen. So I think there's 2 types of content which is being created, whether it's a publishing platform, whether it's the BuzzFeeds of the world, they're all creating a lot of machine-based content. So content creation is endless. There is no end to it. Brands are becoming smarter and smarter. Everybody, for example, I'm sure everybody's facing this. Everybody's moving from Facebook to Instagram by default. They're putting on Instagram first and then going wherever else. Snapchat is something that people are now adopting a little bit. WhatsApp has become the default, whatever you want to call it. The fake news and this and that. Snacky content consumption is very high. So as high as in a day you're logging at least 18 to 19 times to your WhatsApp. That's a huge amount of content that you're consuming every 2 minutes. So content creation is not stopping. Analytics and storytelling is going hand in hand. Brands are getting smarter. They have a sense of what their friends and family and audience is watching, and they are going by that.
And and just to add a small point, over here. Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine.
Is just to add to your point that every kind of content is now leading people to sample other content. So
Yeah.
when you're seeing WhatsApp content, you're wanting to go onto Instagram, sample a longer video. Then you're seeing that same kind of people who are going to see long form content on OTT, and then the cinema business is booming.
Yeah.
So right now, every form of content is booming. It's not just one form of content. It's the beauty of the time that we are living in.
See, it's the TikTok generation, so to say, but the retargeting and the reimagining of content
Exactly.
that you're talking about, the retargeting is so strong now that the content is being repurposed on the fly. It is also being language adapted on the fly. You're not writing copy. There's no back-end person sitting and writing copy. There's a machine on your code writing your copy in 5 languages or 9 languages. So I think it's a completely different world. I've been doing digital since 2005. I've never seen this. This is different. Number one. Number two, it's also content is also a way through which people are having a voice and they're dealing with their loneliness. So there is also a social element here. So I find someone else who likes, for example, drama films, or find somebody who likes art. So me and my 5 friends are on digital. They are on Facebook or Insta or wherever. So there's loneliness. There's a voice. And like CC said, they're not shy.
Discussion boards on Facebook, you see discussion boards on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
People are forming these mini groups about things that they like
Yeah.
and sharing content. And, it's being shared every single day, every single moment.
So it's like an echo chamber, right? Somebody is resonating
Exactly.
back to me
Exactly.
something that I'm saying.
And I think CC will agree on one fact over here, Namrata. I think you'll also agree that because the technology cost is coming down so drastically,
Yes.
that it's becoming easier for people to put out their content.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
That
So-
expensive proposition.
Yeah, our cost per GB of data came down from approximately 16, 17 rupees a GB 2 years ago to about 4 rupees a GB this year,
Yeah.
right? So early last year or whatever, early this year. And, and this is incredibly low when it comes to global standards. 6 cents per GB is, people don't believe it when you tell them that's the data cost outside of India. And what has happened as a result of that is your GB consumed, per capita GB consumed per week has doubled in 1 year. Between 2017 and 2018, it has gone from 4 GB to 8 GB per capita.
That's the game changer. That's
Correct,
the game changer.
right? And a lot of that has been funded, has been fueled by Geo as well, because they are the ones who kind of upended the market. And not just that. So till 2018, India was the second highest video watching country in the world per capita. So we had, we were at a 8.5 hours per week of online video content consumption. This year, May, we crossed the 10-hour mark. So that exponential growth is, earlier we were second only to Indonesia, now we're second to none. We are the world's second largest mobile internet consuming country in the world at about 350 million, with 510 million total internet users. 90% of them are consuming content on their cell phones, and 90% of those are not consuming English language content.
Yeah.
So if we think that content is, it's kind of reached a saturation point, not even close, because there's a whole regional piece of content that's not even explored. We're barely scratching the surface.
Also, your content consumer is a content creator.
Also.
They're not different people. So there is nothing called I am a producer versus I am a consumer. They might be the same people. They
Correct.
might be their numbers might be in millions, which is why you have this entire concept called live streaming, which is why you have shoutcasters, which is why you have streamers. And they've realized this is a very valid way to earn money also. So there is money in the game.
So TikTok is going to start paying people now very soon. So hello, it's going to explode. India has got 110 million TikTok downloads. We're the number 1 TikTok downloaded country in the world.
Brands are already paying.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Brands are already paying. Now TikTok is going to start paying, because TikTok is now starting to take money from brands rather than money going directly.
No, and obviously what CC is saying is I think fueled by the idea that India became the first market that Netflix changed
Reduced their
their pricing for in terms of.
To bring their price down.
Yeah, and it's a function of how much Netflix has got invested in the Indian market, but it's also a function of the fact that the Indian consumer is basically on a mobile phone platform, and that's where they're consuming their content or
And I
the
think
primary
Rahul,
amount of
over here, the point that because I work across platforms, from Jio to Netflix to Amazon to Old Balaji 3-5. The philosophy of Old Balaji today is that they are 30 rupees a month.
Yeah.
And compared to what a Netflix is 199 a month, the price point is extremely, extremely critical for the Indian consumer. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, very price
Very
conscious.
price sensitive market.
Yeah.
It's a very price sensitive market, and Netflix is realizing that. And even Old Balaji or all these people that I work with, they are realizing that at 30 rupees also a month, the consumer is asking for at least 4 shows a month.
Yeah.
He's not happy with 1 show a month. He's not happy with just seeing 1 show a month at 30 bucks.
Correct.
He wants more for his buck.
Yeah.
And that is where the critical mass lies. You
Cool.
have to, which is why I say that there will be another tsunami of content. We are just at the start of it. We're not even scratched the surface.
So let me bring in Anandita here as our resident millennial. Namrata spoke about a lot of issues in terms of how there's a social factor now to content that we're watching, and Samar spoke about the fact that there is a price point, and young students who perhaps don't have the ability to fund cable boxes and set-top boxes and whatever. When you look at not just your own experience, but your experience of your friends as well, do you take cognizance of the fact that you are swapping a piece of content on one platform for another, or for you is this just you'll watch it wherever it needs to be watched throughout the day, however you want to watch it, or are you making discerning differences in terms of, well, this content I'd like to watch here and this content I'd like to watch there? Does that happen to you guys?
No, I don't think the platform really matters now. I think it's the content. And the whole thing about the social factor makes a lot of sense, because on Spotify, my friends know what I'm listening to. There is that option. But on Netflix, I wouldn't want that to happen. I wouldn't want my friends to know that I'm watching this show on Netflix. That's a very, it's a one-on-one thing. So the platform definitely doesn't matter. I think it's just the content is what's driving people to the platform.
So when you go, there's this big thing of cinema versus OTT, right? That's sort of happening right now, and obviously the Reliance announcements that have come up over the last couple of months have driven the sort of almost turning the two into antagonists in a way that people are either going to decide here or they're going to decide there. I mean, from our point of view, I mean, it's all well and good for us. I mean, we're all almost in our 40s or in our 40s. There is a certain primacy of the cinema for us. But for you guys, do you still feel that cinema is sort of the primal form of entertainment, or is that not the case anymore?
I suppose it depends on the film. I mean, if it's a Joker or something huge, you definitely watch it in the cinema with your friends and everyone together. But if it's a normal film, which normal in the sense, if it's just not the content but just the story, I think that can be watched on an OTT platform. But if it's a larger than life movie, then you need a larger than life screen for it.
Actually, the word Rahul that I think is becoming more and more thrown around is
experiential.
cinema.
So I take offense to your ageist comment.
Actually that is the point, right? And that is the point that everybody who makes films is freaking out about also.
Yeah.
Incorrectly, according to me.
Incorrectly, I agree with you completely.
Yeah. Cinema is an audio-visual narrative spectacle.
Yes.
If your content isn't an audio-visual narrative spectacle, it had no business being on the screen in the first place.
Yes.
Now, there were no other avenues. There was no television or there was no OTT, which is why it went on to screen. And it was pointless. It neither served the viewer, neither it served the theatre person. It served nobody. You take a film like, and there's never a more glaring example than a film like Lipstick Under My Burqa.
Yes.
It released in 500 screens across India, mostly in cities. That is not where the film needed to be seen. The film needed to be seen in central India and in, in the B towns and C towns and D towns. It never got the screens, right? So it did the symbolic release, but if they had actually planned and strategized and done a great OTT deal, they could have launched it on OTT, used the money to market it and make sure that it had a wide audience and actually had more on-ground impact.
But that is what is happening. That is what is happening
Now.
slowly.
Yes.
It's
because people are noticing and realizing that there is a platform and content mismatch, right?
Yeah.
So Yes, for an Avengers, you have to see it in big screen, you have to see it in IMAX, etc., 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 or a Nolan film or whatever.
Yeah.
But a lot of the content you don't need to. So we should stop trying to force fit one type content produced for a particular format onto another. So I think that will slowly start to find its place.
Samar, just on this point that CC's talking about, I mean, I also find a lot of times that this conversation it's a little bizarre, quite frankly, in a way, because as somebody who runs cinemas, if there are less films available for distribution in the cinemas or available for exhibition in the cinemas, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I mean, I actually think that that's a pretty good thing. However, there are lots of people in the industry that seem to think that it's the death of Hindi cinema if films start to migrate to the OTT platforms. What is your sort of take on this?
See, my take on it, Rahul, is that they'll have to change the business model of cinemas. The business model will have to change because, yes, the number of films will come down. It's not going to be that 200 films will release in theaters or 300 films will release in theaters. Even if it's the Americas, the number of films releasing in theaters is coming down. So that business model will need to evolve.
Yeah.
That is what I feel. And if it doesn't evolve, it is going to be like a dinosaur stuck on a highway where someone is going to come and knock it down. And businesses have changed over the last so many years.
Sure.
I mean, look at our generation, Rahul. I mean, we had floppy disks, we had DVDs, we had CDs. They're all dead as a business.
We had laser discs, LDs. Do you remember laser
But now
discs?
we have phones. So that is the screen of choice.
But that's what I mean. You know what I'm saying? That the point is that the technology is changing so fast that businesses are dying out sooner than we are even realizing that they will die out.
Yeah.
So cinema theaters will have to change their business model. Maybe make it into a place where you can come and play video games. Make AI as your
No, and I mean, and there are sort of lots of conversations about that with cinema chains and cinema owners, where they're sort of looking at trying to broaden what is actually played at cinemas. I mean, why not play concerts? Why not play
IPL
sports
games.
events? Yeah, why not
You have to play IPL and
PUBG tournament.
Yeah, I mean, why not have a massive PUBG tournament
What
or something like
will
that?
also happen is that today with AI coming in, you will be able to generate video games and you'll be able to generate off films which can then sustain it as a business model.
No, if I go back to transmedia, what Samar is saying, right? If you understand transmedia, that you have one piece of content which could be, for example, maybe I'm not supposed to say, a piece of content doesn't work on film, but the same piece of content can be taken across other formats, right? Or if it works on film, it can still be taken into gaming, it can be taken into merchandise, multiple other.
If you want an example, look at Bhavesh Joshi.
Yes.
It did terribly on the big screen and it just blew up online.
Khandani Shafa Khana.
Right? It completely blew.
Khandani Shafa Khana.
Both these films.
Only does well on OTT.
It blew up online.
Thugs of Hindustan doesn't work on anywhere because it's a bad piece of content. It doesn't matter how
But
big you are.
that's the Khandani Shafa Khana is a good example of what I'm saying, of the power of the lack of inhibition of digital, which is a captive non-captive individual viewing.
Yes.
That individual viewing allows you, I mean, I doubt anybody in India would go with their parents or with their, even with friends and to go and see a film about a sex clinic, right? It's a little odd.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them know, maybe not the whatever Generation Z and all that, but some of the older people, but you don't mind watching it online, right? So whether it's Bhavesh Joshi, whether it's Khandani Shafa Khana, these, for example,
Or did you even imagine earlier that you will have a entire content company which only made content for Facebook, for example, Dice Media? A phenomenon like that didn't exist.
Correct.
Or you had a live streaming platform like Twitch, which was only looking at gamers twitching themselves.
No, and just last week, I mean, we had a masterclass with Dhruv who did Little Things for Dice Media on YouTube, and eventually that became so successful that it got picked up and season 2 came on Netflix. So that's an example of how you can build brands. So I mean,
And it's funded, so it's also bringing money into media business, which traditionally is not an attractive.
But on just one thing which I want to I have a slightly different opinion on. I actually don't think the number of films produced in the long term will reduce. Right?
Agreed.
I think what will happen.
The platform will change.
I know,
Number of films will not change at all.
No, I'm saying even films that release on cinema will actually not reduce, because once you find your platform and once you start matching content type with platform, it will give people more confidence
Yeah.
to create more platform appropriate content, right? So now if I am a distributor or if I'm a producer and I don't need to put in that kind of money on, say, if I'm doing 10 pieces of content in a year, and I know that, earlier I would have to put in, like, say, some 2 are really, really expensive and the rest are decent, right? But even on the decent, I would need to put in more money than I would need to, because I had the pressure of releasing it on the big screen.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't have that, and if I'm able to do script to screen in a room workflows, if I'm able to shoot them on the mobile, if I'm able to shoot them, better, cheaper, but continuing to maintain narrative quality, suddenly now I have this extra money that is available where I can actually make a 4th and a 5th film, which is geared for cinema release. So I think this realignment of cost per minute of content across platforms will, in the long term, so in the midterm, people will struggle and they will figure it out. But in the long term, it will actually increase the number of films being created for the big screen with platform appropriate content. So I think
I think my only point of difference over there is that they might not be films. They might be video games. They might
correct.
be,
Any piece of
Or
content.
they might be
40.
interactive storytelling.
Exactly. It could be interactive storytelling. The form might change. Content
Correct.
will not change. The form will change.
So it's, like I said, platform appropriate content.
Also audience
Exactly.
appropriate. So you might have a very different way of looking at content when it comes to kids, when it comes to gamers or teenagers, or it might come to a certain age from 30 to
I think
50.
that was the point I was trying to make right at the beginning. That the funneling of content has started. You're now becoming more and more focused in who you're making it for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the most, I think people have realized finally that you have to stop finding customers for your content. You have to start finding content for your customers.
Yeah.
And the moment the content creators start to figure this out, I mean, that'll become the next wave of the whatever V 3.0, 4.0 of content.
So there are two
Rahul,
things.
the wise CC has spoken.
The YCC has spoken. So there are two things that I want to touch on that we've both raised before we sort of start to wrap this up. Samar talked about demolishing dinosaurs in the middle of highways and stuff like that. And, let's talk about Reliance Jio and their announcement that they made in terms of first day, first show, putting films into households through their fiber. Anandita, here's the question. Should that happen and Reliance manages to pull this off, and there are still a number of things that have to be worked out in terms of how exactly they're going to pull it off, but should they pull it off, and movies are available first day, first show in your house, or at a click of a button and stuff like that, are you going to stop going to the cinema?
Nope. The experience is something which it can't be replaced.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the mother of all screens. If you're creating content for the mother of all screens, you want people to go there and consume it on that platform.
Yeah.
It's not fair for the audience. It's not fair for the makers either. So I think like you said, the primacy of movies, it's something that can't go away.
But let's just assume that the makers are okay with this. I mean, at the end of the day, Reliance is not they're not forcing anybody onto this platform. People are jumping on this platform because it's there, it exists, and as we were talking about before the podcast, I mean, how many people does a Hindi film actually reach out to? And here, if Reliance has got the opportunity to double, triple, quadruple that, 5 times the number
With subtitles.
are available with subtitles, dubbed, whatever it is that they want to do. Shouldn't makers be happy about this situation?
I suppose, but being an urban Indian youth, for me it's easy to say that I go to the cinema. But I think your demographic is different. The people for who it's made for, I think they would definitely consume it at home.
See,
But, also everybody's, and a lot of filmmakers or whatever on the production side, they're freaking out because they think that the content that's going to show on the first day first show is going to be the same content that's getting created today. I don't think Reliance is going after the same cinematic experiential content. I think they will create this whole sub-segment of fiction narrative content which is created for first day first show, where you don't need to spend 20% of your budget on marketing, where you don't need to spend that ridiculous amounts of money on 3D or IMAX or a lot of these things, right? And what that will allow them to do is, say, assuming let's look at, even if you look at the worst possible numbers that they're talking for their set-top boxes, and say it's 20 million, right? It won't be, it will be more, but let's assume it's 20 million. 20 million people paying $50. 20 million connections paying $50. 100 crores. Right? So 100 crores for a film that is 100 crores for a film that will maximum cost 20 crores to make. Marketing का खर्चा नहीं है, distribution का खर्चा नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है, right? So I mean,
I'm saying, आप कह रहे हो CC 50 rupees. I'm saying even if they price it at 10 rupees.
Yeah, it's still worth. Yeah, I agree.
It is 10 rupees. We are forgetting the volume of people that this country has.
Correct.
On phone.
You know, today 3 crore people see a film and it becomes a 300 crore blockbuster.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, I mean, saying $50 again was a high amount. So, like I said, at 20 million, even if it's 30 rupees, 25 rupees, 50 crores straight, no distributor cost, no share, revenue share, nothing, right? And that's so. I actually think that, say if I was a production house, I would today start to find a separate team and build out a separate team saying, boss, मेरे को 5 crore का 90-minute film का budget और formula structure बनाओ.
But that is what Netflix is doing, CC.
Yeah,
Drive
exactly,
and
right?
Today, for example, there is a huge number of stars who are coming on to digital. There is an Abhishek Bachchan,
Correct.
there is an Arjun Kapoor, there is a John Abraham, there is a Arjun Rampal.
No, everybody. I mean, that line is gone now.
The line has gone, and today these stars have realized that exactly the same point. That if I was to be paid an X amount of money, if 20 million people watch my film the first day at even 10 rupees, that's a 20 crore first day, which I can never in my life imagine at a box office.
Completely. So the other thing is, and this Anandita's generation and the generation after that, they are finding their stars online. They are no longer finding them on the big screen.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want there can't be a more glaring example than Lily Singh, right? So Seth Meyers, Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon. Who's following them? The next person of the next generation to follow them is a YouTuber, right? Not a film act, not a journalist, not anybody. So, I mean, there can't be a better example of the power of where people are finding their stars online. So,
and today, CC, and I might just add over here a small point you're trying to make, that all these platforms that I'm working with currently, their first criteria to get someone to star in a show is to check out their social media platforms.
Absolutely.
Their social media, presence.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you've got a Bhuvan, you've got all these guys who are now trying to make their transition to actors because they already have a fan base ready for them.
Correct. So the other thing that I want to talk about, I mean, we've tried to tackle the Reliance Jio issue, but the other thing that I want to talk about is gaming. And VR and the future in terms of the other platforms. I mean, 5G is apparently around the corner. All right, it's got certain issues that it needs to go get over, but let's say that it's not that far away. It's 3 years, 5 years away, or something like that. And the nature of these platforms now, these pieces of content, interactive storytelling, gaming, VR, all of this kind of stuff. Is this something that the industry needs to be gearing up for now?
Absolutely.
And what CC says, is very interesting to me because I have 2 children and they're 8 and 12 and their stars are people playing video games and
they're watching gameplay
and they're watching people play games on TV and it's something I cannot understand, but for them it's a whole sea change in terms of how they understand this idea of celebrity and even more interesting, this idea of sportsman. That also is something that's going to be changed. So Namrata, can you talk a little bit about where we're going with these platforms?
So just to quote the numbers 340 million gamers in this country. 1 in every 4 person is a gamer. That is the number. Earlier we used to start playing games when we went to college. जब पहली बार वो हमने laptop देखा है, वो system देखा है, lab देखी है, whatever. Now we are playing games earlier. These kids are playing games when they're 9. The moment the parents realize, okay, above 7 now my child can play a game of a 9-year-old, they're playing games. They start playing at 9. They have an opportunity to become Asian Games winner, Olympian in future, in the next 4 or 5 years. So there is a huge career path that they can have. They can be streamers, they can be shoutcasters, they can be analysts, they can be sports stars, they can be whatever they want to
And
be,
Namrata,
right?
like you said, they form their own community.
They form their own community. A lot of the kids who are on the ADHD scale, kids who are not able to actually concentrate, they are actually really good gamers because that gives them the avenue to be able to
Allows them to do
concentrate.
that.
So on a health side of it, like you said, the whole idea of a sportsman is changing. And there's casual gaming, and there's amateur gaming, and there is gaming, the pro gaming. Everything is different, but their entertainment is not passive content consumption. They're not sitting back like a couch potato and watching films or anything else, right? They are actually engaging in something. So they're very actively engaged. That's where interactivity comes in. It's not about whether you should be looking at this or not. Just look at your kid. He's not just sitting like his mother and watching the Bhair Mein show. He's at 11 o'clock, from 11 to 2. He's told, I have 3 hours of screen time, whatever screen you want to choose. He chooses 11 to 1, and that's the time when he's playing with kids across the world. That is also a skill set he will need tomorrow to get a job, because his teams are not going to be sitting with him in a room.
Absolutely.
And these are global kids. They have a very different way of looking at and this is their entertainment, this is their education. When they're watching gameplay, and your father says, why are you watching this? The kid will dart back and says, you watch cricket just to understand cricket. I watch League of Legends just to understand League of Legends because I'm interested in it. You have to listen to this. Sure. This is what this generation is. Esports is their football or their cricket, whether you like it or not. So you can't walk away from it. In the entertainment space, it is one of the largest revenue spinners.
Completely. I mean,
Google Stadia.
PewDiePie, right? He has 60 million subscribers. He has 60 million subscribers for his gameplays.
Yeah.
Last year alone, he made $12 million just off ads that ran on his gameplay videos. $12 million is not a joke, right? $1 million a month, right? So, I mean, that is one bit, and that is the kind of to look at it as...
The biggest thing that's happened, and I think Namrata made that point very, very clearly, is that they formed a community.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that is the beauty of the online space today, that kids and adults alike are able to form a community, and that community is growing every single day. It's multiplying.
See, when a Ronnie Scrawler decides to set up an U-Cipher, there's a definite business model also there. So let's also look at that part of
I mean,
it.
PUBG September 2018 had their first Indian national championship.
Yes.
Total prize money was 50 lakhs.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
The number one team got 15 lakhs.
Yes.
The same month, we had India's national badminton championship, where the number one prize, the person who won, got only 10 lakhs.
Yeah.
Right? So a game that's been around for less than 2 years versus a sport that's been around forever. Yeah, okay. I mean, different everything, different skill set, different everything needed. But I mean, if you do a sport to sport comparison,
yeah, I mean, you can talk of the fact that if you win a major championship in tennis, I mean, you'd get what, $5 million, $5.5 million. The guy that won the World Cup of Fortnite won $3 million. I mean, that's what he won. So it's almost instantly comparable.
More than a golf tournament, more than kabaddi.
I think 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we were shocked at the idea of online poker and poker becoming the big thing.
Yeah.
In 5 years, it changed.
Yeah.
And today it is a legitimate profession for people.
Dream 11.
The point that I'm trying to make over here is that technology is changing every single day. We have to keep up with it. We have to keep up with the way this beast is evolving, because it is still not even like 10% of what it will turn out to be finally.
Also, it is the hero thing, right? It's the whole hero complex. If I want to play a game, I don't have to be... If I want to play cricket, I have to be physically fit in a certain way. Here, because as a casual gamer, I'm just playing on a screen, I feel like a good player even if I'm 100 kgs, and that gives me a certain sense of accomplishment that comes with it.
yeah, and just coming back to the other thing that you were speaking about, which is VR. Now, that's the fourth content consumption platform. There's film, there's television, there's OTT, and there's VR. And it's come out of the trough. It's come out of its worst possible year that it had in 2017, 2018. And now we're starting to see platform appropriate content being created. We're starting to see people paying more attention to the craft of creating content for VR, as opposed to producing content for OTT or any other platform and trying to shove it onto this thing. So whether it's in live streaming, I mean, if you look at some of the VR live streams that have happened where they've built out a great deal of narrative storytelling in live VR, which was completely missing, a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, people were producing live sports for VR just like they would for TV, completely forgetting that there is no Zoom in VR, right? Various other things. So even the sports production for VR is changing. Fiction narrative storytelling is emerging.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you have a whole generation of filmmakers today that touch wood, once the Whistling Woods VR lab gets its act together and starts to teach students how to create content for VR as the fourth platform, every single Whistling Woods alumni by 2021 will be as ready to create content for VR as they will be for film, TV, or OTT. India has 300 million VR ready consumers on the mobile plus headset. The only way to move them from being VR ready to VR consumers is content.
Yes.
And India as a market, we have to stop looking at it you have to stop doing the top-down approach. You don't have to make location-based experiences tethered to server room scale VR content, because India is not the market. We have to approach it bottom up, mobile plus headset. If a guy is watching a 10-minute video in a train as part of his or her regular journey, he or she should be able to slide the phone into a headset, watch a 10-minute fiction narrative piece of content. Now, it may be a documentary in VR, it may be a narrative story, it may be fiction, it may be the horror thriller, it may be a series, right? So I think approaching VR as the fourth content platform will start to have you'll start to see a lot of real life applications for it, I think, in about a year and a half, 2 years from now.
A lot of it was experimented during the Kumbh this year. A lot of people went actually with the VR gear just to shoot the Kumbh, because it's such a huge experience. And the frameless storytelling in itself is so exciting. The fact that there is no frame, I think for filmmakers, I don't know what.
Yeah, I mean, it's both. It's a double-edged thing. It's both a challenge as well as a thing, because now as a filmmaker, for the first time in history of filmmaking, you have to learn how to direct attention.
Yes.
Because you don't have the frame, right? Anything was out of the frame, people didn't see. Now you have to create that frame in the viewer's head, so you have to direct attention. Plus, you have to
CC, I mean, and CC, you're aware of it, and how Samsung is changing the whole experience of even VR. I mean,
Absolutely.
With glasses where you can sit at home and experience cinema.
Correct.
So, like I said, we are just at the cusp of it. It's going to explode and explode how?
So just to now sort of wrap this up and finish it off. I mean, we've got sort of subscription services being launched by Apple and Disney, and we've already got Amazon and Netflix, and HBO has got HBO Max, and here in India we've got a plethora of these subscription services at different price points, and all putting up different kinds of content. Then to add to that, you're going to have subscription services that will give you VR content. You've got Google Stadia, you've got Apple Arcade, you've got all of these services coming around. Plus, you've got your subscription that you pay for your set-top box or your cable box or whatever. When it comes to the consumers, what are the kinds of decisions that consumers are going to have to make?
So I have and I'm going to give out what can possibly be the greatest business idea of this century, according to me.
What, for free?
For free?
Yeah, it's fine.
Charge
right?
for it.
Free education.
Everybody,
right?
please listen.
You need
Education
somebody needs to reach out to a bunch or many or most of these platforms and get API access to their content and create a post-paid content business model, right?
Yeah.
Which is what? So say I am a mobile user, so I have an X thing where I get X local calls and X local minutes, and an ISD call is say $5 extra or whatever. At the end of the month, I get a bill, right? There is an absolutely minimum cost that I need to pay in order to be on the mobile phone service. I think that's what needs to happen with content. So there has to be this app.
That is what the plan for Jio is.
Search and discovery, right? So the absolute minimum thing is what I will need. Now I have access to all this content.
Yeah.
The problem is Nobody is going to be able to afford say a $200 a month for Netflix, whatever, $1,000 a year for Amazon, $30 a year for this, and $20 and this and this and this and this and this, right? But because the content on all of them, A, is not standard, B, is not always compelling, right? So unless there is enough volume of compelling content on one platform, it's quite difficult to do. Nobody is going to get on to just one. So the idea is to allow people to have access to the content for a small fee on a per content basis, and have them pay as a post-paid concept at the end of the month. So at the end of the month, when I get a phone bill, I have, this is my STD charge, this is this. Similarly, I consumed all these pieces of content. Here's $10, $5, $10, $5, $100.
But that is exactly the business model for Jio. That is exactly the business model for where you're going to get.
But Jio is not aggregating other platforms yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
They started to make moves.
It's happening
now.
a little bit on smart TV where the
Yeah.
apps are getting aggregated.
No, but again, that's just access. See, that's just physical access to the app. It's not access to the content,
Agreed.
right?
So that's
Summer.
In my opinion, that is the next step that Jio will be doing, or any other big player will be doing. They're going to create the Hulu of all these OTT apps.
So essentially, we're talking of moving from a all-you-can-eat buffet to a à la carte.
Yes.
Is what we're essentially
Exactly.
speaking
Yes.
about. Is that
Which is what TRI also did. But
yeah?
Kind
what
of,
we are-
yeah,
what
for
I
TV.
think what we are trying to, I think the business model that is going to happen, Rahul, is that the way I see when I talk to all these platforms is the fact that you are going to now start paying the data companies. So Reliance or Jio,
Yes.
because they are going to have cables everywhere, will start charging boot to be carried on their platform.
Yeah.
Will start charging alt to be carried on the platform, and the consumer will get it free.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the I mean, even in the US now with they've got rid of the net neutrality idea.
Yeah.
So all of these
Exactly.
things, I suppose, are possible in India. Quite frankly, never really had that law. So this is what is going to be there. So
Exactly.
on that note, I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you, Samar, for coming on the podcast. Thank you, Namrata. Thank you, Cece. Thank you,
Rahul.
Anandita,
Thank you.
for doing this.
you.
It's been a fascinating discussion where we've talked about a whole range of different things, from kinds of content to content platforms to pricing of content to how consumers are going to actively try and select the kind of content that they want to watch. And more importantly, we've tried to demystify, I think, some of the ideas that exist and some of the media narratives, I think, that are being put out there that these pieces, these platforms are necessarily competing for your views and your eyeballs, and I think we've tried to explain that that's not necessarily what is going to be the case. So it's been an interesting discussion, and I hope that our listeners have learned a lot from it. If you have, please stay tuned to whistlingwoods.net for any future updates on that. Thank you all very
And before
much.
I leave,
Wait.
before I leave, the verdict is out today.
And before
Yes.
Summer leaves, another plug for his new show, The Verdict. The Verdict, which is out today on what platform, Summer? On
Z and Alt.
Alt Balaji and
Z5.
Z5. So if you are interested in very, very dramatic legal-based content, please go out and watch that today. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And
Thank
we
you.
will see
Thank
you
you,
all
Rahul.
next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.